Hi folks, how are you doing? As you probably already know, the third round of the Sinquefield Cup was a really stunning one, with tons of fighting spirit on all the three games of that round, with all the players giving all their best, tactical chances in all the games, really sacrifices here and there, and really beautiful games. And well, the first one to finish on that third round was the game between MVL Vachier-Lagrave, the Frenchman with three names as white, against Aronian, who was playing black. Let's see what happened, because that was pretty and an interesting game. Lagrave played this scheme with white, fianchettoing his bishop on g2 first. Now he plays pawn to d4. Levon gets prepared to meet an eventual c4 with c6. Vachier just castles. Oops, not. It's and knight f6. Now Maxime plays knight bd2, Aronian castles, and finally he throws c4, reaching kind of a Grunfeld position, fianchetto Grunfeld, or maybe Schlechter Slav, but whatever, it doesn't matter too much. This is very just a position, just a game of chess. So bishop e6 is what Levon plays here. Really interesting move, because it's in fact threatening a pawn here on c4. The pawn and the bishop from behind are attacking the c4 pawn. And not so many games with this move in my database. One of the players with black having played this is, for instance, Rand Melkumian, a young Armenian GM working with Levon for some time. So one must guess Levon must know this game, and he took the idea from there. That was a game against Sasikirian. b3 seems very natural, defending there and giving the bishop the b2 square to be developed. Black plays knight e4, bishop to b2, and knight takes d2 is what Levon plays here, and really forcing white to make a decision right now, to sack or not to sacrifice the pawn on c4. And the point is that if queen takes d2, this didn't happen in the game. Well, in fact, this is what happened. I was meaning knight takes d2 didn't happen in the game. Was defending with the knight the c4 pawn, but with the precise move c5 here, with both his bishops able to control all the complications in the center, it seems black is equalizing without much problem this game. So Maxime Vachier-Lagrave went for the queen takes d2 move, sacrificing a pawn, but certainly having compensation for it, some interesting compensation. So Levon took on c4, and the move is knight to g5 to take on e6, threatening to take on e6 and to spoiling black's pawn structure, etc. Here the engine, for instance, was evaluating bishop h6, pinning the knight as the best black had, and after h4, still it seems white has some interesting compensation. And another move apart from that which was played is one that Aronian suggested during the post-game interview. He thought maybe bishop d5 could be interesting, but after e4, h6 he recognized that this wasn't looking very good for black. And anyway, he just took on b3. This is what happened in the game. Of course, this knight came here to take the bishop, so he does. F takes, and now these are a couple of weak and bad looking doubled pawns, and which is probably more important, light squares around black king are weak, and eventually this king is going to be a very important factor here. The weakness of this king is going to be a key factor in this game later. Queen e3 played by Maxime, targeting both e6 and b3 pawns. Aronian maybe went too greedy here, but once you're here, you just take the pawn on a2, and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave takes on e6. It's a check. King h8, and he takes backwards with his queen, one of the pawns, having these very nice placed pieces. We see both bishops on the big diagonals, the one on b2, the one on g2, the queen and the rook doing a great job here, putting pressure on black queen side. And really, it seems nice compensation for a pawn, especially considering that black doesn't have that many active pieces. I mean, the bishop is here, the rook has an open file, the queen has something, but not much. This rook and the knight on the queen side are stuck on their starting squares for the time being, and definitely a nice compensation for white. This is kind of things we could try to learn from these GM games. How these little things matter too much. Finally, both bishops very active, bishop pair, rook and queen are very active here, so definitely compensation for white. This is, by the way, where Levon thought, he told so in the press, in the interview after the game, he thought something went really wrong. So he tried rook f5, which maybe isn't the best, because it seems Maxim had here a really good move, strong move, d5 pushing the pawn. Point being that after c takes, white is kicking this rook out of nowhere with g4, and the rook is now not very well placed. Rook goes somewhere, for instance to f7 is suggested, and the bishop takes. And this bishop now is even more powerful, attacking the rook, attacking b7 as well. The queen is supporting the bishop. They are both, both these diagonals, the light square diagonal, dark square diagonal, are really molesting black king. So really a very great position here for black, maybe almost a losing one for black. So white really having tons of compensation here. Instead, Maxim plays rook fb1, which is not bad either. This is kind of a Benko gambit idea, but with reversed color, trying to put pressure on the queen side, having sacrificed the pawn. Aronian played queen b6, voluntarily putting the queen on the b file, but he's also putting some pressure on d4. I mean, you have to try something. Now e4, apart from everything white had, now he adds to the factors favoring him this pair of central pawns looking very good, controlling the center and willing to advance, causing lots of damage to black. Rook now must go back to f8, and bishop c3, the discarded attack against black queen. Queen goes to c7, and a very logical move here, queen b2, putting pressure, even more pressure on this dark square diagonal. Now g7 would be hanging if this diagonal is opened, and of course putting pressure on b7 with the queen and the rook. So definitely on the driver's seat, MVL having a very good game so far. Levon tries to keep to hold the queen side, but white has such dominant and well coordinated pieces, he can choose in which side of the board he wants to play. So he's controlling, putting pressure on the queen side, he's controlling the center with this his central pawns, he's controlling the king side, because black king is really weak with all this power white has on this dark square diagonal. So really an impressive example of how to get compensation for just a pawn, all these active pieces. This is like the dream position for white. d5, very strong move is what MVL plays, attacking g7, kind of forcing bishop takes, queen takes with check, king g8. Here white had the idea to try, for instance, bishop h3. Now the bishop could go to e6, absolutely controlling this king side, putting this king in lots of trouble. Probably black has to give material here, at least to survive for a couple of moves. But what Maxim played is really strong too. e5, he keeps advancing his pawns. Now this bishop is unleashing his power on the diagonal. c6 is under attack, and remember there is a pin on the c file. The pawn just cannot capture, the queen is hanging on c7. So this was a very fine move. Aronian, already probably knowing his loss, tries to get some compensation going on, some counterplay with a5. He's got a passed pawn, he tries to push it. D takes c6, this pawn is protected. Knight a6, finally the knight is developed, but too late unfortunately for Aronian. And now white is forcing matters with queen b3 check, attacking b6. After the king moves, Maxim takes on b6, reaching winning, technically winning. Not very difficult to convert this, as we will see right now. Uh, white c pawn will be decisive in this position. Knight goes to c7, trying to blockade, but this poor knight will be removed from that square very soon. Rook to b7. The rook on f comes to help the knight, but now very fine maneuver by Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. Rook a4 to go to d4 and later to d7, attacking this knight, completely controlling the 7th rank and advancing this c pawn, which is going to be deciding the game. Rook a6 was played here, well, just to make a move. c6 is protected by the bishop. h4, Maxime doesn't want to allow anything here on the king side, although it may not be even necessary. King g8, and now the aforementioned plan, rook to d4 to go to d7. Aronian, well, started blitzing his moves just to follow the forced line. Both players already knew what was going to happen here. a4. Of course, black is getting his pawn pushed, but it is too late. Rook to d7. Levon just doesn't even care about protecting the knight. He keeps pushing his pawn. Rook b takes c7. Rook takes c7. Now an intermediate check for white. Bishop d5 check, putting this king in a really miserable position. Now he takes back. a2, and now some intermediate checks. Rook c8 check, and after king g7, rook g8 check. Aronian just had enough. He just resigned because the following line is absolutely forced, no way to escape from it, and that's absolutely winning for white. It would follow as this, king to h6. Now this king is absolutely passive, doing nothing, which is something not very desirable in the endgame. Of course, white has to give up his bishop for the pawn. Rook takes, but he's just on time to push c7, rook c2, and it is not difficult to guess white's move here. White is promoting and winning the rook, and absolutely the game, no discussion about the result of the game here. Really fine job by Maxime Vachier-Lagrave here in the third round of the 2014 Sinquefield Cup, beating Levon Aronian from Armenia in a really beautiful and a very instructive game.